Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike Romano here with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for November 18th, 2020, recorded around 2:44 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic this afternoon, not much is actually going on. For the first time in a while, we are actually relatively quiet in the Atlantic basin. We do not have any active named storms left in the basin, as the remnants now of Iota have crossed over into El Salvador and crossed over into the Eastern Pacific basin and have now dissipated completely. Just some mid-level energy here that we are watching, potentially maybe for some redevelopment down here in the Eastern Pacific, but strong upper-level wind should be preventing much of that over the coming days. You can see a very strong cold front now affecting southward across most of Florida and into Cuba, and this has brought some very nice weather for Florida, as temperatures today have failed to get even above 80 degrees. Our overnight low last night was about 53, so definitely getting cooler here as we start to see some more refreshing air coming in from the north. Again, we can see only some high clouds scattered around portions of Pennsylvania right now. No real concern for any significant storm systems, at least for the time being right now. Fairly good cold blast, especially up towards the north here, where temperatures are failing to get even out of the 30s for today's highs. Now, in the Eastern Pacific Basin, we do have one tropical storm. It's been a while since we've talked about the Eastern Pacific. We do have Tropical Storm Polo, which again is very disorganized. It is not very well organized. You can see from earlier this afternoon, it was actually semi-organized. We had what was inferred to be a central dense overcast with some banding that was occurring, but strong upper level wind cutting across this area, and a relative lack of high sea surface temperatures has basically caused us to become devoid of any significant convection. And you can see these cloud elements here further towards the north and east. These are basically cold core elements here. These are basically suggestive of cold air there's kind of a cold layer at the surface, and there's a warm layer up, let's say about 850 millibar to 500 millibar range. So what this is actually doing, these cold core elements here, these are basically cold cumulus. So these are not necessarily indicating the abundance of instability, but this is rather indicating the presence of cooler, shallow marine layer across this part of the world right here. So as this continues to kind of move towards the east and into this environment, or towards the west rather, into this environment, it's actually going to cause a decrease in the overall thunderstorm activity, along with strong upper level winds cutting across similar into this fashion. We have pretty strong upper level winds that are cutting across like that. Now, what's the reason for all of this suddenly just kind of stopping? Well, first of all, this is pretty late in the season for both the Eastern Pacific and the Atlantic basins. Of course, today is November 18th, and the hurricane season for both basins lasts until November 31st. So there is a pretty late season event right here that we've had for both basins. Now, today, again, this is the Madden-Julian oscillation forecast, the velocity potential of 200 millibars in the atmosphere. And what we're really looking for here is all of these blues, and you want to see this if you're a fan of tropical cyclones. All of this is indicating rising air over the Indian Ocean and Africa right now, and you have a fairly significant stout area of suppression out here across the East Pacific and moving into the Caribbean. So what this is going to tell us is that we're likely to see the East Pacific and the Atlantic, both basins, going to be quiet, probably now through the remainder of the hurricane season. There is an area of subtropical disturbance that might develop out here in the northwestern Atlantic if we actually kind of switch back here. There is an area of disturbance that, again, right in this area that may have a shot at developing, only a 20 or 30% chance of developing over the next 5 days, so not a very high chance. Again, very cool environment out here, so not really indicating or not really watching for that potential at the moment. But if we go forward with time here, we'll go down to the week 2 extrapolated forecast. This is from November 26th all the way to December 2nd. And again, we can see this large area of rising air in the atmosphere centered over the Indian Ocean and West Pacific. And then you'll get this area of sinking branch kind of dying, but it is a sinking branch nonetheless over the Atlantic and the Caribbean. So this should keep suppressed basically keep hurricanes from developing out here. This would certainly be a positive for anything to form late season out in the West Pacific. But the environment is now starting to change. We're going to lose a lot of the dynamical support for hurricanes and tropical cyclones to form now in the Atlantic and the East Pacific. So we're likely now just about basically done with the hurricane season, hopefully, knock on wood. But we seem to be pretty much done at this point in time now. So if we look here on the models, this is the GFS forecast. We're going to take a look here at the 850 millibar vorticity level. This is the spin in the atmosphere at about 5,000 feet off the ground. And you can see that there's a couple of things going on right now. This is the background of vorticity associated here with the remnants now of Iota. This big trough that's digging in here, this is creating that cold front that's extending all the way down here, down really across that. And your warm front is kind of draped right across, similar to that. And then you have a big stout ridge of high pressure over the Canary and Azore Islands right now. So you can see really not much is really changing. We go out here, this is 72, 84, go out all the way to day 5. Now, you'll start to see here at day 5, there is maybe an area of consolidated vorticity trying to develop in here, just a single closed isobar. And isobars are basically just lines of equal pressure. So you do have a one singular closed isobar in here, and now this will be trying to drift generally northward over the next several weeks here, because again, it's still in a fairly weak steering flow. You have a ridge out here and a trough that's digging in across here, so this is going to take a little bit of time to drift north, but eventually it will, and you can kind of see some of that energy is absorbed into an area of extratropical low pressure near Iceland and Greenland, kind of an extending cold front similar to that. Now, the one thing we'll have to look for is, again, the leading edge of fronts is going to, or the trail end of fronts is going to be right about here. So we'll have to watch this vorticity, but I'm not really expecting much to happen. If we kind of skirt back here, if we actually look here at the Euro forecast, this is the 850 millibar vorticity off the Euro. Again, much of the same solution here. We do see this energy try to develop down here and then just gets pulled northward and absorbed into an extratropical area, and that is pretty much that. And no other areas really seem to be bundling out here across the Caribbean or elsewhere. It looks like hurricane season is finally going to try to come to an end. So some good news here over the next several days. Now, if we go back here and look at the GFS forecast, one of the things that I really want to point out here is the 200 millibar wind. This is basically at 39,000 feet in the atmosphere, and we're looking at what's going on with the wind shear. So you can see right now, this is valid for 78 hours from now by 1 p.m. Saturday. You'll notice that, again, we have generally this subtropical jet located over much of the Gulf of Mexico and Florida, and then a tropical upper tropospheric trough that's sitting over the Bahamas, kind of inducing its own bit of vertical wind shear. So our subtropical jet kind of follows something much like that. So that's kind of our subtropical jet right now. And you also have a secondary jet max located over the plains, and then kind of a third one over portions of Canada and the northeast United States. Now, what this is doing, again, this is creating all of this air to basically be flowing in one direction fairly fast over the Caribbean. So we have some fairly strong vertical wind shear located over the Caribbean at this time, in the Gulf of Mexico even. And that remains to be kind of in place through the entire forecast period. This is, 234 hours from now, by 1 a.m. Saturday, November the 28th. So this is way far out in time. We still have a fairly sheared look here in the Caribbean, a fairly sheared look in the Gulf of Mexico, and definitely out across the main development regions. So we seem to be in a pattern now that's going to be fairly supportive of absolutely nothing. And that's definitely some good news, as we've been really hit hard this year with hurricanes in the Atlantic basin. So thankfully, it looks like now the time is coming where things are going to be quiet. This would be a pretty good severe weather setup, though, down here. I'm going to point that out. That would be a pretty good severe weather event, maybe for portions of the southeastern United States, if this does come to verify. A big jet max right across here. A fairly potent subtropical jet right here, creating about 90 knots of shear across portions of the southeast. This would be fairly supportive for intense supercell thunderstorms if that was the case. We can just kind of take a look here at a sounding really quick just to see. Maybe not so much. You have a fairly decent warm layer here up above the surface. You can see that a lot of air mass modification occurring here. The one way you can tell that is because what's actually happening, instead of the temperature line, the red line kind of following something much like this, it actually skews back towards the right here. So the temperature is actually increasing with height. And if we kind of skew this down, we're looking here roughly about the 800 millibar layer. So roughly about 4,000 feet, we're looking at about temperatures roughly about 75 to 76 degrees Celsius, right there, or 75 to 76 degrees Fahrenheit, right above the surface at about 4,000 feet. But at the surface, you have temperatures right there at about 55 Fahrenheit, fairly low dew point. You can see the dew point value significantly drops off, and this blue line is our wet bulb temperature, just if you're wondering. So maybe not so much of a severe weather event, but if it could get any storms in that environment, fairly potent shear does exist down there as well. Now, one thing we are doing is our hurricane forecasting lab. What this basically is, I put a poll out yesterday, or rather this morning, and asked if you guys would want to see this, and most of you replied yes to that. So, we're bringing our first hurricane forecasting lab to the channel, which will be released tomorrow, November 19th, later in the afternoon. This will teach you how to forecast hurricanes and tropical cyclones in any part of the basin for any particular environment, and we'll go over the basics here with Lab 1. It's going to be a multi-part series, but we'll do more forecast labs with that. All right, with that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Of course, I am Mike O'Malley. I'll talk to you guys again some more tomorrow.